Hey guys, Max here, and this is your daily update for yesterday, the 3rd of January 2022. Of course, we had a pretty interesting day. Some major trouble in Turkey, Elizabeth Holmes's conviction for fraud, and then a touch about Apple and Tesla, especially in China. So let's just get right into it. So markets were open, and what happened? Well, by and large, they just went up a little bit. The S&P 500 went up another 0.6% on the day. The Stoxx 600 was up 0.6% on the day. The FTSE 100 was pretty stagnant, but in the hour that it's been open this morning, it's gone up 1.3%. Overnight, most indexes saw some green futures, with the S&P up another 0.2%. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index was up 0.9%. Basically, the markets were just quite happy. There aren't too many fears going around, and the year has started off pretty well, as long as we aren't looking at China, that is. There are no major moves in any currencies. The dollar spot index is holding pretty constant, and even the Turkish lira is sitting just above 7 cents, where it was for most of December as well. Of course, it's a similar story with treasuries and other countries' bonds as well, pretty consistent across the board, no major changes. Gold is sitting at about $1,800 an ounce, and Brent crude oil is sitting at about $79 a barrel. The crypto markets took a small hit, but only about 1% or so. At the time of making this video, Bitcoin's sitting at about $46,000, so really not a major fall at all, but a slight decline. And the same sort of thing is being seen across the rest of the crypto market with Ethereum and all the other altcoins as well. Now, while a bunch of individual companies had some interesting and exciting news, the markets as a whole, the macro picture, was just pretty standard. Pretty calm and just very slightly bullish across the day. It was actually really rather peaceful. Now, of course, we spoke a fair bit yesterday about Tesla and their strong delivery numbers and the fact that pre-market their shares were up a fair bit. I think it was 9% before the markets even opened. But of course, it got even crazier when the markets did open. The stock closed at just a touch under $1,200 a share. I think it was literally $1,199.6 or something per share, which was a 13% rise in one day. Now that was a pretty crazy figure, to be honest, but it still isn't even an all-time high for Tesla. Maybe it will continue to rally today and hit a new all-time high, but I sort of make a point of not making specific predictions about Tesla's stock price because it just seems to go in seemingly random directions, up or down, big drops and big spikes. It seems to run on hot air and not much else, and everyone who does make predictions just finds themselves wrong time after time. Now, obviously, we were expecting a rise from this news, and maybe a 13% rise sounds reasonable at a surface level, but to be perfectly honest, it really doesn't add up for me. These extra deliveries, about 50,000 cars more than consensus than the market was projecting, well, that means an extra $2.5 billion of revenue for Tesla, and yet the share price has risen by $130 billion. That really just doesn't add up in my mind. It has to be either that Tesla was undervalued before the news came out, or it's now overvalued now that the news came out, or maybe it's both or neither or whatever it is. I'm just going to try and keep my opinion out of this video, but the market's pricing of Tesla is entirely inconsistent and it just doesn't make much sense at all. Of course, Elon being the founder of Tesla, sort of, not really, but the largest individual shareholder of Tesla and the CEO, again, sort of, not really. I think he calls himself something stupid like the Techno King, Lord, something like that. Anyway, his wealth shot right up yesterday and he found himself a cool $30 billion richer, which would have been no doubt nice to see for him. He is officially worth over $300 billion again, and I personally can't wait to read the tweets from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders attacking him for supposedly making $30 billion in a day while his workers make $30,000 in a year. The tweet storm that Elon gives back will no doubt be entertaining, and I might even be able to make a video out of it, so let's just keep our fingers crossed. Now, his selling of the stock seems to have ended with the new year, as we were assuming it would. It's just the nature of the tax rules that he needed a bunch of cash as the new year was starting, and as of yet, there have been no new stock sales from him, which will no doubt be comforting to his shareholders. Unfortunately, the news regarding Tesla isn't all good, and this is somewhere I'm actually not going to hold back, I'm afraid, because the truth is, Tesla deserves crap for this decision. They should not get off scot-free at all, and I'm not going to let them. So the news is that Tesla is opening up a new showroom in the west of China in Xinjiang, where the genocide of Uyghur Muslims has been taking place for years now. Of course, we go back a year or so and there was a lot being made of Tesla's push into China and how they would be able to make loads of money selling their cars to Chinese people, so this news really shouldn't surprise us. Funnily enough though, the CCP has already started to take a disliking to Tesla. They are a competitor to NIO and BYD and a bunch of other Chinese domestic EV startups. The CCP don't like American companies in the first place, and so this really should have been seen a mile off, but Tesla were far too naive here, and they found themselves under a lot of attacks and a lot of pressure from the CCP itself, from lots of Chinese people on their social media sites like Weibo, and state-run media outlets as well. Now, apparently, Tesla has not learned its lesson. It's still trying to break into the Chinese market and continue to expand their sales there with no regard for human decency or morality. This new showroom that they're building is in the region that has just been sanctioned by the US for overwhelming use of slave labor. And yeah, Tesla's decision to move forward with this is simply immoral. There's this claim that goes around constantly that it is Tesla's mission statement to move the world forward towards a more sustainable future or something to that effect. But there is nothing sustainable about genocide or slave labor, and I hate the fact that I even need to tell some of you this, but the real purpose of Tesla isn't to drive acceleration of EVs in the world. It's to make money, and apparently to make money at any cost. They have refused to comment on this. They've just ignored the media outlets reporting on it and ignored any questions from media on it. And I've yet to see what some of the Tesla YouTubers have to say about this latest move, but I have no doubt there will be some children in the comments as usual screaming FUD, but the truth is the truth. It's a shame to see Tesla go this way, but it's not exactly surprising, and it is actually on brand. Now, on a little bit of a lighter note, and sort of a funny one if you ask me at least, was the fact that Ford stock actually outperformed Tesla stock over the last year. Now, I was pretty surprised to see that. I didn't think it would have been the case, but it turns out it's broadly true. Ford's share price rose 155% on the year, while Tesla's rose 64%. Of course, we saw the announcement of the Ford F-150 Lightning, we saw deliveries of the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and while production numbers were very low and there wasn't anything too impressive, the cars themselves are actually really quite good and are fairly high quality, especially compared to a lot of other EVs in the market. Now, Ford investors seem to feel a little bit reassured that the company has a strategy to move over into EVs, that they can apparently make them without too much trouble, and especially so that the world's best-selling vehicle is going electric as well. Ford's performance probably is in part at least a bit of an EV boost. I've seen a couple of random articles suggest that Ford is now an EV company, or at least an EV stock, and while I completely disagree with that premise, I can at least see how its pricing seems to reflect that idea. Ford's PE is sitting above 30 right now, which for a normal car company is very high. Usually we expect to see companies like that sit with a PE around 5 to 10, not 30, and certainly not 300, so there has definitely been a change in the way Ford is being valued by the market. Obviously, this ties in with the huge Tesla increases over this last year, the huge rises and sometimes falls with other EV companies like Nikola, Lordstown and Lucid as well. But this actually reminds me a bit of VW, Volkswagen Group over in Europe earlier in the year, where it saw a price spike as investors started looking into its potential as a possible EV stock after its pretty solid performance regarding EVs, particularly in Europe. Now, this spike didn't really last, but there was a lot of hype going around the company suggesting that it was going to become valued like an EV stock. But in the end, reality returned to the stock. It's a European company, it isn't listed in the US, so it wasn't really too surprising to see all that capital leave once more. Now, what happened with some other companies over the day? Well, Apple was officially a $3 trillion company, which is pretty crazy, but it isn't exactly a surprise. They've been close to that number for a while now. I think actually at market close, it was $2.99 trillion, but it touched that $3 trillion mark throughout the day and was making waves because of that. Now, of course, Apple is a pretty damn incredible business, probably the best run for-profit business in the world, and there are some concerns about its valuation and how it will perform this year, but actually, as far as tech markets go, especially in the US at the moment, it's quite reasonable. There are some problems facing the company right now. It isn't risk-free like any investment. There is a very tough regulatory environment around right now, especially with companies like Apple. Their App Store practices are widely seen as monopolistic and anti-competitive, and there's a decent chance that some changes are forced onto the company as a result of that. they've started a rotation towards the so-called metaverse or augmented reality, virtual reality, whatever you want to call it, an area where Facebook or Meta is obviously going to fight them all the way. And then there's the fact that this is an unproven sector, to be honest, and personally, I feel like there is far too much hype when it comes to the whole metaverse right now. It all screams bubble in my mind and seems eerily reminiscent of the internet in 2000. A cool idea, maybe great technology in the future, but just 20 years too early. Now, there are some other concerns about iPhone sales, obviously an important part of Apple's business, and the company has put out statements claiming that their sales might not be as good as expected. And then, on top of all that, the company is under a lot of scrutiny, and rightfully so, I might say, for their use of products and goods produced by slave labor in Xinjiang, a similar problem to the one we just talked about with Tesla right now. And there's a decent chance that they might have to change their supply chains if the US government continues to crack down on slave labor from that region, which hopefully they will. Now, over in Turkey, things are getting worse to the surprise of absolutely no one. Now, if you need an update on the situation as a whole, then I'll link down below a video I made last week about the economic situation in Turkey. It goes far more in depth into what the problems the country is facing and why they're facing them than I will in this video. But in short, new data came out for inflation in the country and it just reached 36%, up from the expected 27% that analysts were predicting. This is obviously very bad news, but it isn't exactly surprising at all, as interest rates have been cut by 500 basis points since September, when inflation was already sitting above 20%. The monetary policy in Turkey is completely off the rails. They have no real control over what's happening, but they could, to be honest, if they would just admit their mistakes and change their plans, raise interest rates instead of cutting them. The interest rate, for some perspective, by the way, is negative 22%, the real interest rate. Why wouldn't you borrow all the money in the world if you could with rates that low? It's no wonder why this is all happening. Now, of course, Erdogan being Erdogan, he's trying some unorthodox measures to improve things that almost certainly won't work. He's ordered Turkish exporters to convert a quarter of their revenue to lira in an attempt to boost the lira and stop it falling so harshly. The move would supposedly help boost Turkey's foreign currency reserve by forcing companies to keep some of their revenues in the local currency. Again, in theory, it should help the lira, but will it be enough to counteract everything else that's going on? I seriously doubt that. Now, in the future, we might see oil prices ease a little bit as OPEC Plus is set to boost the supply of oil again, with 400,000 more oil barrels a day to be produced. The group has been thinking about or trying to increase production for a while now, but hasn't wanted to send oil prices spiraling down, so they've been pretty cautious. There were some concerns at the beginning of December about demand for oil in the wake of the Omicron variant, and we actually saw a price drop. But those fears never really materialized, so OPEC is back to producing more oil again. Prices will probably reduce a little bit. There's some weakening demand from China and certain travel industries, of course, but by and large, we shouldn't be expecting a huge dip to something as low as $30 a barrel. Now, finally, we have Elizabeth Holmes' conviction for fraud after the Theranos saga. Now, for anyone who isn't clued up on it, I definitely suggest you give it a quick read, a quick research. It's a thrilling story to say the least. But basically, this woman has a personality disorder and she dreamt of being the next Steve Jobs. She dressed like him, lowered her voice to be more manlike, and dropped out of university purely to create a startup because that's what all other billion-dollar startup founders did. The idea was she would produce a blood testing machine that could do every test with just a drop of blood, and it was an entire fraud. It was never possible, the technology was never there, but she just lied and defrauded billions of dollars from investors, and it all finally caught up with her. She's been on trial for a while now, I think about 3 months, and was just found guilty of 4 counts of fraud. Now, she could face up to 20 years in prison, though to be perfectly honest, I really don't have any idea what her final sentence will actually be. The important things though are, have investors learned anything from this whole saga? No, the answer is no, not at all. The markets are too hot and venture capital is too alluring, so there are going to be far more examples of frauds like this coming out over the coming years. If this had all happened today, if the fraud was still ongoing, it would probably mean that Theranos would be a $100 billion company and there would be an army of retail investors determined to defend the company's reputation against any dangerous, evil short sellers. And that is pretty much it for the day. We'll be back tomorrow for another daily update. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and a comment to bless the YouTube algorithm. If you want more content like this, then check out our Patreon and join our community of investors. You get access to our Discord, loads of exclusive content like insight into my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. There's a link in the description to masterworks.io, a site that allows you to buy fractional shares of art from world famous artists like Banksy, which can be a great way to diversify your portfolio with non-market correlated assets. It's completely free to sign up, you don't have to buy anything, you don't have to hand over any card information, so if that sounds interesting then make sure to check it out. There's also a link in the description to BlockFi, which will give you up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you use it. You can also get 9% interest on stablecoins like USDC, which is a far higher rate than you get from any savings account these days. Just make sure not to use Tether. Thank you for all the support, thanks for watching, stay stoic, until next time.